Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with flawed masterpieces, but we love them anyway. Today, I want to talk to you about a work that one of you already mentioned as we were starting off this series. The fact that it popped into view so early, I think, says something all by itself. It's Sibelius' Symphony No. 2. And the weaknesses occur in the finale, as you might expect. Why would we expect that? Well, so much romantic music has what we might call a finale problem. And we're going to be talking about a lot of those. We already discussed Tchaikovsky's Fifth. The problem is, well, it's all Beethoven's fault. That son of a bitch. What he did was he wrote something called Symphony No. 5. And Symphony No. 5 follows a tragedy to triumph progression. And that proved irresistible to the romantic mentality that you have. It's such a sensible approach. Let's think about it for a minute. You have this sort of angst-filled opening movement full of tension and hysteria. And then you have a couple inner movements which can be of varying emotional levels. You can have a relaxing slow movement by contrast and a malevolent scherzo, which is sort of what Beethoven does, or at least because of the classical tonal scheme. Generally speaking, you'd have the minor key angst-filled opening movement, and then a more consoling, relaxing, slow movement. And then the scherzo is normally in the home key. So that's minor key again, sort of a recall of the, if not exactly the same attitude as the first movement, because it's a dance after all, but at least a return to its general atmospherics. And then all of that gets resolved in a finale of unalloyed triumph. And Beethoven's unalloyed triumph is the most unalloyed of all triumphs. I mean, if you're going to unalloy a triumph, that's the one you're going to unalloy, for sure. It's amazing. It works fabulously well. And Beethoven's works fabulously well because of his control of large-scale tonal architecture. In other words, the emotional progression represented by the blazing C major finale, which goes on and on, it sounds pretty inevitable. But even Beethoven in the coda of the Fifth Symphony, which we could talk about at some point, tends to go on a bit, maybe longer than it needs to. You could make that argument. Well, in the Romantic era, that perhaps excessively long coda became a perhaps excessively long whole movement, because the triumph, the inevitable triumph after the angst-filled opening movement, can seem somewhat unmotivated. And Sibelius' second has this problem in spades. Why? First of all, the first movement isn't angst-filled at all. It's lovely. It's essentially, it's a pastoral, just a lovely pastoral thing that rises to a beautiful, noble climax. Yes, there's some tension. There's a little bit of, developmental discussion back and forth. But essentially, it's gentle and it's lovely and it's pretty happy for the most part. With Sibelius, the angst-filled turmoil, actually, it's very original. He does something very original. It happens in the second movement, which is the slow movement. But the slow movement isn't really that slow. It starts out slowly, but it's in the minor key, and it has all of the angst and turmoil and struggle and that kind of stuff. That all happens. It happens in the second movement. And at the end of the second movement, we encounter something which could also possibly be described as a weakness, which is Sibelius's curious inability to end. When he sets up a process of development or motion or whatever's going on, he always seems to have a bit of an issue in finding a way to stop it. And the ending of that second movement is like that. Remember, it's like, yeah, it just keeps looking for different ways out until you finally get the last plonk, plonk, and then it's over. So there's that. The scherzo, like that of Beethoven's Fifth, leads directly into the finale without a pause. Although this particular scherzo, because the key of the symphony, I think it's D major, isn't it, is also completely happy. I mean, it has its little shadings of semi darkness possibly, but it's also very pastoral and it's very quick and very light and almost Mendelssohnian. And then you finally get this huge heroic finale. Now, it's not so much that finale is unmotivated, because it is actually directly related thematically to what we heard in the first movement. It's just the first movement upside down, right? The first movement is da 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 da. Well, this is da 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 da. It's you just turn it upside down and it becomes the finale, heroic, right? You do need to have a performance that keeps it moving, and so many conductors, in an effort to emphasize the heroism of the thing and the loud bits and that sort of thing, play it just too heavily. I mean, it has to grind its way forward. It's like a machine, right? Yeah, da 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 da. And underneath, it's going whomp ba da da dum, whomp ba da da dum, whomp ba 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 bum. It's got this sort of ostinato that's pushing it along, and so often you don't hear enough trombones, you don't hear enough of the tuba, the timpani going whomp, like that. So it can really bog down very easily. But then the bigger problem is that it comes around one too many times. It has two climaxes, the second of which pushes it over the top. And it's approached by repetition of a very simple theme. Dum ba da da dum da 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 dum ba da 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 dum ba da da dum ba da da dum ba da 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 da. Ba, ba, ba. It just repeats that over and over again underneath a swirling mass of strings and winds going like that. And it's very effective. It works wonderfully, except that the second time it's going to repeat itself even more. And that's an issue. It's really an issue because we are ready to culminate probably about 7 or 8 minutes before it finally happens. Now, when it does happen, it's glorious. I mean, it's really, really well done. It's beautiful. And if you hear, again, a great performance like George Sell or Barbaroli's Royal Philharmonic or a bunch of other ones, it's the ending when it arrives is very fulfilling. It really is. But it could have fulfilled, maybe just a few minutes sooner. And the best evidence, I think, for the fact that perhaps that finale is a little bit too long comes from the Fifth Symphony, which similarly has a heroic finale, but which Sibelius understood only needs to come around once. You only hear the glorious swan theme in its original form, mind you. I mean, we're not talking about developments and variations. The first time through. And then it recapitulates quietly, not loudly, and builds to its final peroration immediately without undue repetition. And so if you compare those two finales, one of which is 6 or 7 minutes long, 8 minutes long, and the other of 15, twice as long, and the impact that they have and the amount of time that they take, you see that Sibelius has become a master of proportion by the time he got to the Fifth Symphony, whereas with the second, he may not quite have been there yet. Nonetheless, we love it. We love it because it's gorgeous music and because he does deliver the goods at the ending. It's not like the whole thing collapses into a quivering puddle of, ineffectiveness. It's not erectile dysfunction in music, not even close. And so it's something about which there will always be mixed opinions. But the irony for me is that the Second Symphony, which I don't think represents Sibelius at his absolute best, beautiful though it is the one that everybody gets to know. It's the most popular of all. And the reason it's the most popular of all is partly musical and partly political. It's because it was a patriotic statement for the independence of Finland at the time that Sibelius wrote it, and it was perceived as such. And although it's not really heard that way today, people respond innately to the heroism and the striving that finale represents. In that respect, it's quite successful, and it can overcome any structural weaknesses. So there you have it. A symphony that's, deserves all of the popularity it could have. Virgil Thompson hated it. He said it was, provincial and cheap and tawdry and all that stuff. We don't care what he thought. And, but yes, it has arguably some frailties, and overcomes them, I think, is the best way to say it. So keep on listening, friends. Thanks for joining me. Take care.